You know, I grew up playing everything. So many hours playing NHL games with my little brother, countless sleepovers with fighting and wrestling games, days of my life spent with GoldenEye, Half-Life, Time Splitters, Wolfenstein, and at least 1,000 hours between New Vegas and Oblivion alone. I grew up playing with Donkey Kong, Mario, Liu Kang, Jin Kazama, Commander Shepard, Ratchet, Crash, Jack, Jill, and Chris, Agent 47, Lara, Sweet Tooth, Sam Fisher, and of course, Solid Snake. I love it all. I love this art form. But if there's one genre in gaming that has always stuck out to me more than any other, it's horror. Fear is a universal language. It takes many shapes and comes in many flavors, but in the end, everyone is afraid of something. Gaming is unique because we can experience this variety of fright through so many different lenses, and some of the creepiest scenarios happen in games that aren't even horror focused. I wanted to compile a list for a long time now of what I consider to be the most memorable and effective horror settings in gaming. This isn't a list of the best pure horror games, but rather pieces of or levels in games that left the most frightening impression. Naturally, I had to cut some titles from the list, and these may have had a much greater effect on you personally. Let me know with your own list. I'm genuinely curious to read what frightens you. Anyway, the time has come, and so have I. Rev up the Bugatti. Way. Here are 3 settings that nearly made the cut.
Baker Family Ranch, Resident Evil 7.
Coming after the loud, bombastic Hollywood action of Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 7 scaled things way, way back. Well, for a while anyway. Out of Raccoon City and into the depths of Louisiana, the Baker Family Ranch was a massive departure from the typical shambling zombies in concrete jungles of games past. Some of the scariest bits of this setting don't involve enemies at all and take place within the first hour. The exploration of this rotting bayou shack, the abandoned film crew van that tied directly into the first hour demo, rotting food in the kitchen with that foul, sticky refrigerator, secret doors leading to subterranean passageways, even the simple things like family pictures of the Bakers when they were presumably normal. Now, it's Resident Evil, and things do get goofy again with Jack Baker doing donuts in the garage while you're busy healing your severed mold hand with magic liquid, but when you're being stalked by a screaming Mama Baker, or when you notice an elder lady in a chair that seems to be changing places in the house, Resi 7 offers plenty of genuine frights, and it saved this series from going off the deep end, and for that, I will forever love it. But there was a very important demo that inspired Resident Evil to go in this direction.
The Home, PT.
The Home in PT stands still today as the greatest tease in video game history. With PT standing for Playable Teaser, this is apt. The demo was supposed to give way to what was eventually going to be a full-blown Silent Hill game titled Silent Hills, set to be directed by Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro. Let me tell you, if you don't know already, fans of this series were frothing at the mouth when this demo came out. I definitely was. The setting itself is simple, an average-looking hallway with a foyer, a small bathroom, and a few steps that lead to a door that, when you go through, starts the loop all over again. Much like the Baker Ranch, you take clues from the environment and try to piece together what happened in this place. This mystery is deftly enhanced by the spooky radio broadcast detailing the horrific familicide by the patriarch of this household. Each successive pass through the hall brings progressively more disturbing scenarios, such as a refrigerator hanging like a chandelier, all while dripping blood with the terrifying cries of a baby screaming and thumping about from inside. Then there's the trippy sequence where everything is bathed in a red light and you move at super speed, with the little twitchy eyeballs in each picture frame. There's also the Eraserhead-esque thalidomide fetus crying out in the bathroom sink, blood splattered all over the floor. You never see what happens, but you hear it. And based on Lisa's abdominal bleeding, you can probably figure out some of the dark shit that happened in this house. I have to say, on pure terror, this is probably the scariest video game I've ever played, and the setting narrowly missed the cut. But there are two big problems with the playable teaser. First off, and it's easy to forget this if you haven't played it in a long time, or if you watch a walkthrough where someone makes it look simple, but there were some cryptic, frustrating puzzles near the end of the game that completely killed the terror of the situation as you frantically run around saying Lisa's name into your microphone because that might work, maybe? There was even a comic strip about trying to get the fetus to laugh, and I remember chuckling at this strip distinctly because yeah, PT got really annoying near the end. But we all figured, hey, it's an experimental demo and it'll get ironed out in the actual Silent Hills. And there's the other problem. Kojima and Konami had their little breakup in 2015. Kojima fled to make his own studio, and Konami, as spiteful as ever, delisted PT from the PlayStation Store, and unless you already owned it, you could never get it again, which stands to this day. And if you accidentally deleted it, you can't even download it, despite owning the license. Yeah, you can try the proxy server method, but it shouldn't have to be this way. Granted, I don't know what really happened between Konami and Kojima, and for all we know, Kojima might have been a massive pain in the ass to work with. However, there's no need for Konami to be so petty as to strip this gem from the hands of players eager to give it a try. Hell, re-release it and charge $5, $10, 15, something. Alas, Silent Hills was never made. This is, in part, why I put it here on the honorable mentions list. It's just trapped in this limbo. It's out there, but not really. Also, another game that nearly made the list, Visage, or Visage, I don't know, took the basic premise and the general vibe of PT and expanded it into a full game, one which I recommend, by the way. Anyway, PT, if nothing else, serves as the greatest what if in gaming history. I'd tell you to try it, but some scorned lovers in Japan say no.
Butchers Creek, Pennsylvania. Butchers Creek.
The final honorable mention coming hot off the heels of its fantastic demo released in October of 24, Butchers Creek is a new David Szymanski game in development now. I released a video on it not long ago, so I'll speed run through this, but suffice it to say, this demo is really impressive. Taking inspiration from Manhunt and Condemned, the gritty, grimy VHS aesthetic is on full display. The demo areas, an abandoned cabin in the Appalachians, and an underground snuff film compound are phenomenal and chilling. After getting captured, the player has to fight their way through members of this snuff group. Finding the gnarly aftermath of various scenes is very disturbing, as is reading the scattered notes suggesting how some of the victims were ended. Butchers Creek has immense potential to become a certified horror classic if it's done right. The AI needs some polishing, sure, and David Szymanski himself has detailed the mess of code that he's been diligently ironing out for many months. But if this game gets the time and the resources that it deserves, we could finally have a proper successor to the Manhunt and Condemned games, and I cannot wait. Okay, so those were just some of the honorable mentions, but this list could go on forever. The school in Postal 1 and Sevastopol Station come to mind. Anyway, Let us begin the top 10.
Number 10. SM13 Iron Lung.
Speaking of David Szymanski, he brought us this exceptional, unique horror game in 2022. Iron Lung is unlike anything I've ever played. The player controls a convict that has been promised the prize of his freedom if he can photograph proof of resources deemed vital to the survival of the human species. The resources are said to lie deep in an ocean of blood, forming on a remote moon known as AT5. I told you, unique. SM13, nicknamed the Iron Lung, is the vessel that you are submerged within. They close off the window on the forward end of the sub and weld you inside of it. If you have thalassophobia, this game will make your chest feel heavy. Honestly, the first time I tried Iron Lung, I spent a while becoming acquainted with the controls, unique premise, and gameplay hook. Once I had the moment where I kind of got it, I was completely obsessed with this game. It's quite addicting. I was having fun, a lot of it, but I wasn't necessarily scared. That is, until I reached my third or fourth landmark. The pictures you take at these coordinates get stranger and stranger. Then, your equipment starts to break down, and you'll be so hyper-focused on avoiding the ocean trench walls that a burst of compressed steam from a malfunctioning valve handle will jump scare the shit out of you. And then you notice your creaking sub barely holding together, dripping with what sounds like water until you remember what kind of ocean you're buried in. And then you hear a fire breaking out in your cabin, and you frantically search for a way to put it out. Hearing the large groan of something pass around you, only to then swipe at your hull, all the while you notice your O2 supply is dwindling. Iron Lung is one of the few games I've ever played where the pressure builds so well as the time goes on, and how ironic. I would never dream of spoiling the ending, but let's just say that leaky seams in the hull are small fish compared to the real threat. SM13 is an incredible setting for a horror title. Play this game.
Number 9. Spencer Mansion Resident Evil.
Let me tell you something. I vividly remember playing the first Resident Evil on Christmas morning as a small kid. My uncle got it for us, and we were maybe a little too young to try it, but it was awesome, and we loved him for it. I knew the basic concept of zombies, but mostly from cartoon stuff. I hadn't watched any of the George Romero classics yet. So running through this door to be greeted by the legendary Great Baldy was, the way he slowly turns his head, seeing the blood of poor Kenneth on his mouth, and those eyes, those cold, dead eyes that see you as the next meal. Thinking back on how I felt when I first saw this scene still gives me a little chill. And that's just the start. Like the RPD in the sequel, Spencer Mansion has a tremendous amount of surprises in store for the player to uncover. And you have to remember, this was the 90s, my boy. Games were bright and colorful and mostly a family-friendly thing, thought of predominantly as a kid's toy. Yes, Alone in the Dark was a big inspiration for the first Biohazard or Resident Evil, and we're all familiar with the famous dog scene coming right from Alone in the Dark. But for the majority of us, Spencer Mansion was our first excursion into the world of survival horror.
Number 8. USG Ishimura Dead Space.
Once the pride of the United Spacefaring Guild, the glorious planet-cracking vessel was equipped with a first-of-its-kind shock point drive and used to mine planets for their resources, and could even pull asteroids into the collection bays for smelting. After discovering marker 3A on Aegis 8, An organic growth known as the corruption began to spread out over the ship and change its habitat. Long story short, by the time the game's protagonist, Isaac Clarke, arrives on this vessel while responding to a distress signal, things have gone horribly wrong. Necromorphs have taken over the ship and have slaughtered or converted the crew. The lore, involving factions like the Church of Unitology, is rich and frightening, but you only need walk around a bit and you'll understand why the Ishimura is an iconic setting in gaming. Long, dark hallways bathed in dynamic emergency lighting, large bays with mangled, barely alive crew members being assimilated into the corruption while their dangly bits jingle about while they wail in agony. It's unpleasant. As the game progresses, the player pieces together the painful overtaking of the Ishimura via audio and text logs. You can hear necromorphs scurrying just behind the bulkheads down a hall, or they'll simply just jump out at you from a nearby vent port, eager to smash Isaac into red paste. Going further and finding the religious unalive rooms where zealots have ended themselves en masse only adds to the gruesome mystery. The Ishimura is the gaming equivalent of Event Horizon and is a masterclass in sci-fi horror design.
Number 7. Brennenburg Castle, Amnesia: The Dark Descent.
If there's a list of top horror games, you can bet that Amnesia is bound to make the cut, and with good reason. This was one of the early titles that stripped the player of a weapon, instead leaving you to rely on your cunning and guile to escape what haunts you in the castle. Playing as Daniel, you'll wake up with a note written by you, for you, without any memory of how or why, hence the game's title. The gameplay concepts of hiding, running, and maintaining sanity were fresh at the time, and with only a bit of tinder and an oil lantern to light the path, Amnesia gets mighty spooky. However, the setting is what's always captured me. This cold, dark, Prussian castle is gorgeous and feels straight out of a creepy Wallachian novella. The shadow that stalks Daniel feels ever present, and there are some intense scenarios, which is all well and good, but the further you go, when the truth about what Daniel had been doing in the depths of Brennenburg Castle is revealed, is when this setting takes on a whole new level of terror. Especially that bull. Ugh. Great game.
Number 6. Bart's Department Store, Condemned Criminal Origins.
I had the meat sweats talking about the mall level in my review of Condemned, so I won't go super in-depth here, but suffice it to say, the department store is scary. There aren't any zombies, demons, monsters, or big loud set pieces. It's scary because places like this really do exist. Abandoned buildings converted into crack den squats with less than desirable inhabitants. In this case, a group of nut jobs have taken to donning old mall clothes and holiday masks, which they then use to blend in with the department store mannequins. After you see one of these guys casually step off of a display to strut your way, eager to cave your head in, you're on high alert and everything has you on edge from that point forward. Your paranoia only heightens when you catch one of them staring at you from the upper balcony. This is also a memorable stage thanks to the decaying holiday decor scattered about, replete with a big dead Christmas tree right in the heart of it all. Listening to the warped version of Deck the Halls lurch to life over the dying PA system is icing on the cake. A cake that reeks of bum piss. Okay, now we're in the top 5, but before we go on, I now have a Patreon. Please help me fix my shitty car. Yeah, you're gonna get advanced screenings of all this content. You're also gonna get the ability to vote for the next bit of content, and you're going to get exclusive videos only available to Patreon members, but blah blah blah. Come on, lube is expensive. Okay, thanks.
Number 5. Raccoon City Police Department, Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, I tried my best to do the impression of that guy. I don't know. What an iconic location for video gaming as a whole. Of all the sequels in existence, very few titles managed to meet, much less exceed the standard of quality from the first game. But Resident Evil 2 may be one of the finest examples in the history of this medium. Though there are several memorable locations and scenarios in the series, few stand out like the RPD. Just what a perfect location to place the player in during a zombie apocalypse, and being that it's Resident Evil, you know there's so much more than meets the eye. The police department is a converted art museum, which I love as an explanation as to why there are so many zany puzzles scattered throughout. It's simple and perfect, with landmarks like the goddess statue prominent in the main hall being as iconic as it gets. And that music. Speaking of icons, this is also where we meet the Licker, one of the greatest fictional antagonists ever conceived and my nickname in high school. The exposed brain, no eyes, the skinless, muscled physique combined with razor-sharp claws and thick, panther-like movement, the dripping maw, and the very human breathing sound. I can't wait to show my future children this character for the first time. It may be a little too scary, but they'll forgive me. In 30 years.
Number 4. Lakeview Hotel, Silent Hill 2.
No spoilers here, okay? Besides, wouldn't want this video to become too bloated, now would we? I spent 3 hours picking apart Silent Hill 2 in my review. I love this fucking game, and I had a lot to say, so to whittle down to just one location as the best is tricky, but for my money, Lakeview Hotel is the peak. Again, no spoilers, but if you know the revelation in room 312 and the other big reveal immediately following that, then you know exactly what makes this quiet, special place so memorable. But before all that even comes out, Lakeview is very unsettling. The note at the check-in desk addressed specifically to James, the roaming abstract daddies, and some bigger, nastier things in the basement when playing the remake, the inexplicably bizarre canned light bulbs, the space heater in the employee lounge tipping you off as to what happened, the VHS tape. This level is such fire.
Number 3. Pigsy's Home, Manhunt.
After the prior levels, which consisted of mostly run-and-gun action, our protagonist, James Earl Cash, loses all of his firepower after being attacked in an elevator. When we regain control, someone arrives to greet us. Pigsy. An obese, nude, agile cannibal who we can presume is mentally challenged. He wears pig's flesh as a mask and wields a large chainsaw that he keeps dull on purpose to inflict extra pain. That's all scary enough, but it gets worse. Imagine the smell. Rotting pig's flesh and unwashed fat man skin cheese. Ew. Speaking of smelling, Though this level sees James revert back to his primal survival skills of hiding in the shadows and ambushing his opponent, Pigsy is programmed to, quote, smell the player, nullifying the previously safe, shadowy cover. The backstory makes it worse. Pigsy was a star in the Valiant Video snuff film ring before Cash was forced to participate, but he was fired for being too savage. Yes, even the wicked auteurs of snuff films were uncomfortable with Pigsy's level of violence. The only reason he was kept alive was to be fed human bodies, aka the evidence. You can probably see why this comfy abode is high on the list, yeah? The hellish, corroded attic with a big broken bed and a corpse bound and rotting in the bathtub is all extremely vile, and I still remember with great clarity seeing Pigsy run down that hall at me for the first time. Despite being fully aware that it was a video game, I remember having a genuine sense of fear. Manhunt is a masterpiece. Sniff, sniff.
Number 2. The Blood Trail, Max Payne.
She is coming, and hell follows with her. This is the twilight winter. I am ready to be her son.
If you don't want Max Payne spoiled, skip to number 1. Do it now. And go play Max Payne already. Fuck's wrong with you? Now, if you know, then you know. The Blood Trail. At this point in the story, Max has been slipped a Mickey of Valkyr by hitman Mona Sachs. Hitman, hit person, hit woman. No, don't do that. Max goes into a deep, dark hallucination where he ends up running through a maze that gives way to a tightrope trail of blood. Droplets rain down on you like red snow as you hear Max's deceased wife begging for her life, as well as the cries of your deceased infant screaming out in an unsettling loop. Eventually, Max stumbles upon the crib where his baby was executed, and little wooden blocks begin to assemble themselves. My buddy Corey and I pulled an all-nighter with Max Payne back in 2002, and by the time we got to this part, it was probably around 2 a.m. Corey looked at me with exasperation and quietly said, "Can we take a break? This part freaked us out, man." As excited as I am about the upcoming remakes, and holy shit, you better believe that, I'm actually kind of nervous about how they'll handle this section, with modern visual and audio fidelity being what it is. In a game about corporate conspiracies, corrupt cops, and mafiosos donning silly-looking low-budget costumes accompanied by the appropriately cheesy acting to match, you would never guess that Max Payne would dive straight into full-blown horror so adeptly. But there you are. That's Remedy Entertainment for you. One of the best games ever made.
Number 1. Room 302, Silent Hill 4, The Room.
Someday, I'm going to do justice to this underrated entry in this franchise, but for now, let's discuss the titular room. Up front, I won't spoil any important bits. The creepy moments, like the cat bag, are frightening, of course. The various haunts that occur over time can be pretty jarring and unsettling, based on what makes you tick. This is all well and good, but the concept of this setting itself is really what bothers me. Henry, our protagonist, lives in this modest apartment nestled in cozy South Ashfield Heights. One day, Henry awakens in what appears to be the other world, rusting and filthy, with what seems to be a face in his wall. After waking up back in his regular apartment from what seems to have been just a bad dream, he finds that his front door has been locked from the inside with several heavy chains. Without an explanation or a way out yet, you start the game by exploring your place, apartment 302. Outside of the large chains, of course, everything else is so plain. Look out your window and watch the world function normally. I love the little low poly models walking around. It's so charming, and this actually looks like a city that I live close to. The drab, washed-out color palette in the apartment lays the table for a setting that is painfully average. But why doesn't my neighbor notice what looks like several bloody handprints on the mundane taupe wall behind her? Despite my phone line being cut, a woman calls and begs for help, and when I try to call out to a local bar, I get this.
That's what this is, you know. Satanic black magic. Sick shit.
Who is Walt, and how did he write on my door from the inside? And this is why room 302 is so frightening. It presents as normal, but is actually a very clever play on several fears, specifically autophobia, the fear of being isolated or alone. You could also argue for claustrophobia as well. You could scream, but nobody would hear you. You can't open your windows, and pounding on them doesn't help. Clearly, something is very wrong, but there's no explanation. You're just stuck here. And the apartment portions of the game are all in first person, which was new for the series at the time, and it's where I think Kojima-san drew inspiration when he was developing PT. Even Henry's bathroom kind of resembles the one in PT. In the last several years, particularly with COVID-19 quarantines and government-mandated lockdowns, many more people have become familiar with the feeling that this game provides. You see the sun right outside your window, but you dare not leave. And people with chronic illnesses or disabilities have been living with this for years. Remember that next time you want to yell at your barista for not using the right kind of cinnamon or whatever. Anyway, things do end up getting much, much worse for poor Henry. And of course, you do end up leaving, but I wouldn't dare spoil anything for you here. Just know that this setting is a nightmare born of a simple concept. It always kind of reminded me of the short story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, where AM and the humans that he tortures are trapped, and being trapped drives people to madness. For those reasons and many more, Room 302 is the best horror setting in gaming. And that concludes the list. I love this genre, and making this video was a real passion project. I got to record from a PS4, a PS5, a GameCube, a Series S, and my PC, and I loved putting all of it together to make this special video for you. And if you like this video, don't forget to smash that like button.
Sorry, but it looks like your party has been canceled.